Before the fanfare of Liz Truss entering Downing Street, Boris Johnson had one last moment in the limelight. I imagine he was a little disappointed it happened at 7:30 a.m. That was because both he and Liz Truss needed time to travel to meet the Queen in Balmoral. But as the nation ate their breakfast, this is what he said.
On the subject of bouncing around in future careers, let me say that I am now like one of those booster rockets that has fulfilled its function, and I will now be gently re-entering the atmosphere and splashing down invisibly in some remote and obscure corner of the Pacific. And like Cincinnatus, I am returning to my plough, and I will be offering this government nothing but the most fervent support. I'll tell you why, this is a tough time for the economy. This is a tough time for families up and down the country. We can and we will get through it, and we will come out stronger the other side. But I say to my fellow Conservatives, it's time for politics to be over, folks. It's time for us all to get behind Liz Truss and her team and her programme and deliver for the people of this country.
Aaron, what did you make of Boris Johnson's speech? I mean, it wasn't particularly humble. He often sounded a little bit bitter at times, saying the rules got changed, that's why I have to get kicked out. I've actually had all of these achievements. Also, it was at 7:30 a.m., which is kind of surreal. What did you make of it? Your initial thoughts?
I thought the lines just quoted there were quite funny. The whole thing about being a booster rocket, that comes down. It's quite an apt metaphor, although boost to what precisely? Sort of economic meltdown. What was the destination? I think also tying in what Truss said about her predecessor, you can paint, I think, any prime minister in a certain light if you want to. Ukraine war, COVID, Brexit, defeating Corbyn. And actually, for 3 years, if you're a Tory who was really crapping themselves, the prospect of a socialist Labour government in 2018, that's probably quite, you probably would have taken that. It's really hard to say, Michael, because, if you go over the Sunday papers, if you read the Mail on Sunday, the Times, the Telegraph, the Mail on Sunday, I mean, they are talking openly about Boris Johnson, re-emerging on the front line of politics at some point in the next kind of 5 to 10 years. They genuinely believe that's going to happen. And of course, it is important to remember, Michael, that Cincinnatus, this reference he gave, who I believe was a Roman general, he was called to fulfill his duty to his was it the Roman Republic or the Empire? I can't remember, but to Rome. And then, he went back to his humble farming. I mean, so what's Boris Johnson going back to precisely? I mean, he's going to write lots of books which keep him in the public eye and make lots of money. I mean, it doesn't seem particularly humble. I mean, I don't think he's going to go on some, farm and start, picking blackberries or growing asparagus. So the metaphors are quite funny, as ever with Boris Johnson. But I think his next move will be quite interesting, because this is an interesting phenomenon, actually, just generally, Michael, with aging societies, because you have politicians who leave office and then don't go anywhere. Look at Barack Obama. He's a young guy. He's still going to be around a really long time. He still has to do stuff. Tony Blair. I mean, David Cameron's so disgraced, he has to, of course, live in his little shepherd's hut in the Cotswolds. But, that's the exception. And so I think Boris Johnson eventually, maybe not in 6 months or a year, but I think eventually will start causing problems for his party. I think that's just inevitable. He's an ambitious man. He likes the limelight, and he has many opinions on things. So we will see. Although if he can keep his gob shut and not draw too much attention to himself for 6 months, I think he'll be doing Liz Truss a big favour.
I want to go back to this Cincinnatus fella. I mean, I'm not a classics expert. I hadn't heard of him before. I'm not James Butler. But I did go on Wikipedia today. I found it fairly entertaining. So this is their introduction. Cincinnatus was an opponent of the rights of the plebeians, so that's the common citizens, who fell into poverty because of his son Caeso Quinctius's violent opposition to their desire for a written code of equally enforced laws. So he's comparing himself to someone who's viciously opposed to laws being enforced equally. Then it goes on. Despite his old age, Cincinnatus worked his own small farm until invasion prompted his fellow citizens to call for his leadership. He came from his plough to assume complete control over the state, but upon achieving a swift victory in only 16 days, relinquished his power and its prerequisites and returned to his farm. His success and immediate resignation of his near absolute authority with the end of this crisis, traditionally dated to 458 BC, has often been cited as an example of outstanding leadership, service to the greater good, civic virtue, humility, and modesty. So yeah, the thing that most people have been focused on, as you pointed out there, Aaron, is that this dude Cincinnatus, after resigning, then returned to power. But I do think the qualities that Boris Johnson seems to think he has are fairly entertaining here as well. So he thinks that his resigning, he was given all of this power, which he was, and then he used it for a swift victory. And then he was so honorable, so morally upstanding, so virtuous that he decided to resign of his own accord. And I do feel like that is the image Boris Johnson wants to paint of himself. Is that how he's going to be remembered in history? Is this what Boris Johnson's Wikipedia page will look like in centuries to come, Aaron?
I mean, it is interesting, right? This is the image that I think he believes this, by the way, and that he wants to project the idea of, and it was the Roman Republic, it's before Augustus. And this is, I think, referred to by Cicero. He talks about Cincinnatus as the kind of prototypical, this is the perfect example of a citizen who steps up. Because in Roman Republican thought, the idea is res publica res populi, the public good is the people's thing, and every citizen is capable of this virtue. And of course, the more virtuous citizens, the more powerful the republic. And Cincinnatus is a very good example of a very virtuous citizen. This is the complete opposite. A republic, by the way, huh? A republic. This is the complete opposite of what we presently have. We have a monarchy, although it's a superficial difference. Let's just park that for a moment. Where the political elite are a professional, permanent political elite. It's a very different setup. You know, you might say, well, the lessons of Cincinnatus are very applicable to 2nd century Athens, where, democratic Athens, where you have, you have democracy by lot. Okay. And basically anybody can rule, and we have to have a very, of course, just males with property can rule. And, you need widespread virtue. And of course, everybody needs to do their bit. We have a profoundly different way of doing politics in the 21st century in the West, which is we have a specialized political elite, although they're not really specialized at very much apart from enriching themselves and screwing things up, it seems, who are deeply enmeshed with financial and media power. That's how politics works, a set of revolving doors between newspapers, TV channels, like I say, professional political bag carriers and economic and financial wealth. Entirely different to the world that I think Boris Johnson genuinely appears to think that he's a part of.